So without further ado, I'm going to hand it over to Dr. Sara and Dr. Nyanzi.
Thank you, Tina.
Thank you.
Thank you to all of you for having me, and thank you to Susan for inviting me to do this. It's the first time I've ever get to speak to so many people.
And that's fine, and it's scleroderma patients. And so before we do the actual exercises, Dr. Sara has some peer-reviewed journals that talk about Pilates or exercises for people with chronic conditions like scleroderma. And then I will also add on one of the studies that I found about physical therapy and scleroderma, and also myofascial release as well.
So there's not a lot of research out there for Pilates and scleroderma, but I did find one specific article indicating the benefits of myofascial release for systemic scleroderma and increasing the range of motion in the joints that are addressed and having a routine over the course of a year. The study also indicates that they did 20 visits over the year, but the last few visits, there was a gap in treatment for approximately 2 to 3 months where they weren't receiving that treatment. And it found that they regressed in, there was a greater stiffening in those areas. But resuming the treatment on a routine basis does indicate and does help with pain management as well as flexibility and ease of motion. So if you're not already in physical therapy, or if you don't already have a program in place to be stretched or do strengthening to maintain your motion and mobility and increase your overall function, then that's the goal of this presentation, is to encourage you to do that, at least get established in something, and how beneficial it can be to have someone who's understanding the tissue changes that you are all experiencing and getting an improvement in the function.
Okay, and actually, I'll give you a little story. The way I found out about myofascial release was through another scleroderma patient, and this was at one of the national conferences. And we were both in a PT session, and we kind of knew what the PT presenter was saying, and she started talking about myofascial release, and that's how I got introduced to it. Anyway, so I started doing myofascial release, and that also has helped me increase range of motion. I could do a lot more things. So anyway, I also talked about that. I found an article as well of a doctor of physical therapy who did a case study, and this was for their dissertation, and they had a scleroderma patient. And so they said pretty much the same things as Dr. Sara was saying, that they were able to increase their range of motion, they had a better quality of life, they were more active, they could do more things. But as soon as they stopped the myofascial release and the physical therapy routine, things kind of stiffened up again. So really, part of what we're saying is we need to do it on a continual basis. You can have your exercise routine at home, which you put together with your physical therapist, and then every so often you can come in, check in with the physical therapist who can help you with stretching to make sure you maintain your range of motion, and they can also help you do your Pilates as well. So anybody can do Pilates, but you've got to go with someone who understands, chronic conditions, muscular joints, and all of that, so that they can tailor programs that are specific to you. Okay, so
we use Pilates because it keeps you in an unloaded position most of the time. A lot of the exercises are done on your back, lying down, so you're not overstressing any particular joint. And we use spring resistance to help give you the resistance for the exercise, but sometimes the resistance can also be helpful in allowing your limbs to move and giving you force feedback in order to push against, to get you to encourage those muscles to work. So this morning, we're going to start with the Pilates section. I'm going to do a section of exercises, and then I will demonstrate how you can do them at home using an elastic band. So here's our elastic band that we're going to use. It's approximately 4 feet. And you just get to choose the resistance that is most comfortable for you. And then at the end of today, I will also supply Tina with the list of exercises that we reviewed using the band. So you have that as a resource to refer to later. After each grouping of exercises, then we'll open it up for questions. All right, you ready to get started?
Yeah.
So the reformer is developed in such a way that as you can see, she gets to lie down. Her feet are on a bar at the end of the carriage. So the sliding board is called the carriage. The carriage is attached with springs down here. The springs have varying tension. And so with Susan, we're going to just do a few repetitions of each exercise. And one of the things that's been valuable for her is we've been able to grade the exercise in such a way to meet the stamina that she's able to do, and then see her stamina grow exponentially each week, and seeing that progress. Also, because of the springs putting resistance increasing as she pushes out, and then also helping her to bring back in, she's able to increase the range of motion that her knees and her hips are bending with the first set of exercise that we do for the legs. When she's lying here, we cue patients to tighten their abs. So the cue is to connect her ribs to her pelvis, tightening her tummy muscles. Her back position is supported by the carriage. Her head position is neutral. The little headrest is propped up to keep her chin tucked. And then her feet are on this bar down at the bottom that you cannot see just yet. But her feet are positioned in such a way to make a V. Her toes are on the bar, and her heels are free to move up and down.
Navi.
All right, and as she pushes out, she wants to straighten her knees as much as she can against the resistance, and then the springs are going to help pull her back in. With her toes on the bar, she's going to feel the force a lot more in her quadriceps, the front of her thigh, and that's enough of that. So the next position, we bring the feet together. Her toes are still on the bar, and go ahead and press out. And as she presses out, she's focused on tightening her abs and straightening her knees. So you can see the lengthening of her hamstrings up the back, and then she's working her quads a lot. All right, then we're gonna move her feet forward. So her heels are on the bar. Her feet are still together, but now just her heel is in contact with the bar, and her toes are free to move. As she presses out, she should feel more pressure on the back of her thighs here, pressing out, and in her glutes. Her quads are still working, but now she's getting a little more resistance to those hamstrings and glutes when her pressure is through the heels. She's also, as she's coming in, the springs are pulling her knees in as close as the carriage will let her. She's getting flexion in her hips, knees, and ankles. So I'm sorry you can't see her feet. But as she comes in, she gets more bend in the ankles. And as she presses out, she can see her toes are going to stay towards the ceiling, but also work the ankle motion a little bit more. All right, next, put your toes on the bar and lift your heels up. So now she's in a tippy toe position. And as she stretches out her knees, it makes her abs work a little bit more in addition to her calf muscle. And then once we stretch out, drop your heels down. Feel the stretch in her calves. So now her heels are below the bar, and she's stretching the backside of her lower leg and keeping her abs tight so her pelvis isn't rocking around. And then come back up. And one more time, she's going to stretch out those calves and relax. All right, now you can grab your band, and I'll show you how you can do some similar exercises on your own at home. You're going to take your band. You can do this sitting or lying down. You're going to put the band around the balls of your feet, both of them. Feet are in that V position, so your feet are like this. And if you're sitting in your chair, your feet are gonna go towards the floor, but I'm gonna lie back so you can see with your feet are in the air like she had hers with the bar. And I'm pushing my legs out straight, but keeping my toes pointed towards the ceiling. And then I'm gonna bring my knees up. Depending on the resistance of your band, you are going to feel a lot of tension here, but a lot of stretch through the back of the leg. Your abs are working really hard to keep your back stable. And then you're gonna pull back up. So you can change the position of your feet, your feet are together, and do the same thing. So back up and down. And then we're gonna move the band down towards the heels. And I'm gonna bring my feet up. And as I press out, again, you're gonna feel more the back of the legs working. The last one we did with the heels, or the toes on the bar with the heels up, you're not gonna be able to do that one quite as easily unless you have a stronger band. Sorry, just had this breath. So again, if you're sitting in the chair, you're gonna put the band around your toes. And if you can see the bottoms of my feet, and press down. And then let the band pull your heels up. So go from the side. Now legs out straight, you're gonna press down. And then let the band pull your heels, your toes up. All right, the next step we're gonna do, actually, no, we can go for questions now.
Okay, gotta get up.
Yeah.
So if anybody has any
Are there any
questions for
questions
this,
so far?
you can put it in the chat box and I can read it out. And if there's no questions, we'll go on to the next exercise. But I'm going to give you a moment just in case anybody has a question.
So if we have no questions, let's go ahead and move on to the next set and we'll catch them at the next little break. So, back on this one. Yes. And roll to your back. So now we're going to do a single leg activity. So one leg is going to be held up. We call this tabletop. Here's her tabletop. Her knee and her hip are bent at 90 degrees and her toe is pointed toward the ceiling. One foot is on the bar, on the toe of the bar, or on her toes, or on the bar. And she's going to push out with just one leg. The challenge is more to her abs to hold this leg up and her hip flexors. And then on this leg, she's working again on strength training and stretching it out all the way. How's that feeling, Susan?
Yeah, it's getting, yeah.
Tired.
I can feel it. Yeah.
So if you're working with a Pilates instructor or a physical therapist, they can always give you a little bit of assist with your heel as you fatigue. Go ahead and switch legs. The next one is a little more challenging because it requires more coordination. She's going to start with her leg out straight with the carriage down. As she pushes up, she's going to bring her knee towards her chest. And then she's going to push back out. And then up and out. So now she's working on reciprocal motion, meaning alternating motions with her legs as she's pressing up. Then the last one, she's going to go on her heel again. And her opposite leg is out straight. She's got to hold this in the air and let it hover over the bar, which is a whole lot more challenge again to her abs and her hip flexors, as she's pushing with more power on this one leg. All right, take a break. Do you want to sit up while I'm demonstrating? So you can do all of those also with the band, whether you're sitting or standing, sitting or lying down. So if I'm sitting to do this, my feet are not touching the ground. I'm just elevated here. So I can hold this leg out and push one leg up and down. So this is on my toe. I'm going to feel it more in my quad. If I have it on my heel, I'm going to feel it more in the back of the leg. So again, we can go, so that's the last one that we did. On the first one that we did, the middle one is the bicycle, and that's alternating your legs. So you have the band on one leg, bring your knee to your chest, and then switch. So it's a lot of ab work and leg work at the same time to coordinate them. So that's in sitting. Then we can also do it in lying down. So this leg is in tabletop, and this leg pushes out. Or we can do the bicycle, where we alternate. Or the leg stays out, and we push out. Any questions so far? All right, we're moving on to the upper body. You lie back down.
You're gonna walk me out. You're gonna wear me out today.
So I can only do a couple reps.
Okay.
All right. So in the reformer, there's straps that come from the top of it. They're on a pulley system, so they wrap around, attached to the carriage, and resisted by the springs. So for Susan, keeping her legs in tabletop is a huge challenge. So bring your knees up towards your chest. So holding this position is a lot of work for her abs. Bring your elbows down by your side. You're going to press your hands down. So this is working her triceps. That's the back of your arm. Most people don't have a problem doing it with their triceps. The problem is here. But this is where your core is, and this is where the stability comes for a lot of movement. And being able to do this, straight arms, pull down. Now she's still working her abs. I'm giving her a little bit of assist here. And she's working her back muscles and her posterior shoulder muscles. Then we take the straps a little bit out to the side and pull down towards her hips. So changing the angle will change the grouping of muscles that are recruited. And take a break. Doing okay?
Yeah.
All right, next. I talked about how the resistance of the bands or the springs can be helpful to help stretch her out. She's going to draw circles with the straps. And as she's pushing against the straps and taking her arms in a big circle, she can feel how much motion she's getting in her shoulder joints to help stretch things out. When I treat Susan in physical therapy, we do all of our exercises first to get her body as warm as possible and get all those tissues ready to be massaged using the myofascial release in order to get the strength, stretching, and the tissue changes we want for mobility. So legs in tabletop and draw big circles. So her circles don't come above her shoulders, and as she's pushing out against the straps, she's feeling everything stretch in that shoulder joint. Change directions. And rest. And so all of those exercises you can also do with the band. You need to have a place to anchor it though. So I'm going to use Susan to anchor my band. You have to hold the center. Okay. And I'm going to lie on my back. So you can tie a knot in the center of the band and close it at the door and lie on the floor. Or if you have a bed frame that has rungs, you can tie it around that. But you're going to hold your legs in tabletop, and your arms are going to come here, and stretch down the same way she did it. Or you're gonna do arms are straight and come down this way. It's a lot of work for your tummy muscles, but it's also a lot of work for your back muscles. If I were doing it in a seated position, I would have to anchor this above me, like tying a knot here and putting it over a door, which I'll give you pictures of this one because I don't have a door here to put it on. But then you can still do your arms are straight, pulling back and down. As you come back up, the resistance of the band helps bring your arm up, and that's going to help stretch you out as you work it to pull down. And then as you come up is when you're going to get that stretch through the back of the shoulder and the back here. All right. Any questions so far?
So I think one of the questions was, can we do a modified version of this at home with minimal equipment? And I think she came in a little late in the meeting, and I'm hoping that as she's watching you, she's realizing that, but that's what we're trying to do. We're trying to show you what a physical therapist would have you do in the office and what you can do at home with these resistant bands, and try to do basically that modified version at home. And that is the way to do it with minimal equipment. Am I correct on that, Dr. Sara?
Yes.
And
so
then
all I'm using is this one band for all the exercises I've demonstrated for you to be able to do at home. Your body position will change. Where you anchor the band can change, whether it's on your feet or on an object or in a door jamb. That's the only difference that, based on reformer, is that's different from the reformer.
thank
Are there
you.
any other
And
questions?
yeah, there was actually a question about where can one get the stretch bands?
Amazon's the easiest place to get them. You can get them at any sporting goods store. And often they'll sell them in a pack, like they have them at Walmart and Target. They'll have them in a pack with different resistances, which is good because your legs are not going to be they're going to usually be stronger than your upper body. So using a lighter band for your upper body versus a heavier band for your legs can be more advantageous.
Thank you. It's Karen saying, I miss everyone. How long has Susan been doing this system? And that you haven't mentioned how to protect the back.
So to protect the back, it's all of that ab work. So keeping your abs engaged. The cue at the beginning I gave is connecting your rib cage to your pelvis, and you're feeling all of the muscles across your belly and from your rib cage to your pelvis tightened. If you try to suck it in, then you are not engaging all the muscles together. One of the ways I cue patients to tighten is to hiss like a snake or laugh. And as you laugh, you should start to feel some muscles kind of flicker in your abdominal cavity. And that's what you're trying to turn on. So you have 4 sets of abdominal muscles. You have your rectus, which is straight down the front. Those are your 6-pack muscles. You have your obliques on the sides. There's 2 sets of those. And then you have your transverse abdominis, which is, I call it the Home Depot belt. So it's the one that straps you all the way around. You want to recruit all 4 groups. Does that answer the question? Oh, and Susan's been doing this for 4, 5 years, on and off, as we're able. Sometimes there's insurance limits that limit how much we're allowed to do with her. So then she's given a home program to try to keep up with her own stuff until the next year starts or the next authorization comes through.
Yeah, and another reason why we thought this was so important, because we all know physical therapy only gives you a specific amount of sessions per year, I think, and you can start doing so well. And then when you go home and you're no longer on this regimen anymore, that's the one thing we really are trying to get through today, is how important it is to keep this regimen up. It shouldn't be 6 to 8 weeks and then you're done. This should be just part of your lifestyle. So you're constantly in a place where you're stretching your muscles and you're keeping yourself as mobile as possible. So having a home advantage and using these stretch bands and learning these. And, you know, you get to go back on this tape and watch some of the things that they're teaching today and get your own, you know, hopefully daily routine going so you can be as mobile as possible. And I don't see any more questions.
I also wanted to add, if you unfortunately have to end up in hospital, that can really regress you very badly. So I've noticed that several times I've ended up in the hospital. Even just being in bed for a week really tightened up my muscles, and we needed to come back and then re-stretch those so I can go back to how I was before. But yes, also being hospitalized or being in bed for even a week is going to stiffen up and reduce your range of motion. And Pilates is a good way of getting back your regular range of motion.
I think the other nice thing for Susan, when she has had those instances, when she does come back, we start off really slow. We might only do 3 or 5 reps of each of the different exercises we've gone through today. And as she gets better, comes back week to week, we add a little bit more and a little bit more till she builds up her stamina, and also her flexibility continues to improve with each visit. It needs to start off really slow. That's why the advantage of going to a physical therapist versus a trainer. A physical therapist has better knowledge of tissue healing and tissue pathologies, that they would be able to better manage that as far as progressing exercise. But that doesn't mean you can get to the point and then continue with the trainer afterwards if that's what you want, or get comfortable with the exercise set that you're doing at home. But the myofascial release part that we're going to get to a little bit later is needs to be done by someone who understands tissue healing. And even if your insurance only lets you have, say, 24 visits, which seems to be the most common amount, that would give you approximately 1 visit every other week throughout the course of the year. And that, I think, is a good frequency to keep at a maintenance. But if you're trying to improve, you want a little bit higher frequency to begin with and then taper off. And some therapists will do home visits, not necessarily covered by insurance, but that's another option you have, is to find that therapist that's willing to come out and work on you for the hour that you need to, whether it's part of exercise or doing the myofascial release or any combination thereof. All right.
Thank you, Sarah. And can I add, we were talking about this. I saw a trainer, and while I don't have scleroderma, I do have some issues with my shoulders and my neck. And he worked me way too hard. And for a couple years, I couldn't lift my hands over my shoulders anymore, over my head, until I started seeing a physical therapist. And I think it's really important that we remember that living with a chronic illness, you have certain limitations, and they might not be looking out for your best interest in a way that a licensed physical therapist would. And I think that them being in your program it is a better option to be on the safe side, so something like that doesn't happen. I also wanted to mention that one of the members has a comment saying that if you have a chronic illness, you can appeal your insurance cover, your insurance, and they might give you more sessions. Somebody else said that they were screenshotting these exercises so they can remember, but I want to remind everybody, we are going to have we are recording this today, and Maggie asked if there was going to be an edited version, and no, there is not going to be an edited version just with the bands. You will need to look at the entire video. You can stop and start it where you want. That's why you'll be able to have your own link to watching it, but we're not going to be editing it. So it's only showing the parts that you will be using from home. Sorry, but we're not able to do that. And that's all the questions I have.
All right. We're going to change our orientation to use a different reformer for more upright exercises. So just give us a second. So now Susan's sitting on the box, and make sure her resistance is accurate. And she's going to hang on to these straps that she used on the other reformer while she was lying down. Here we focus on her upright posture. So she's trying to make herself as tall as she can. She's keeping her shoulders relaxed. And her hands are going to be by her side, and she's just going to pull straight back. That feels okay?
Yeah.
Good. All right, the next one, let's go for the straps. We're gonna actually cross the straps, loop her arms in, up to her elbows. And her hands are gonna be up in front of her like she's resting on the table. So here's her table that she's resting her elbows on. So she's trying to keep them at that level as she opens her arms up to the side.
Okay.
She's feeling the muscles between her shoulder blades and below her shoulder blades working. Good. Next, she'll grab the straps. Yeah. And her arms are going to turn outward. So her palms are facing outward. Her arms are straight. Now she's going to pull more out to the side. This is the hardest one. And it's been a minute since she's done this. But you only go as far as you need to or as far as you're able to. And sometimes it's just a matter of getting those muscles waking up. Go ahead and take a break. All right, 2 more. Grab the short straps. Arms are out straight. Shoulders down. So from here, she's going to do a bicep curl. She's going to pull her hands towards her shoulders. Notice how straight, tall she is here. And her hands should be coming more straight towards her shoulders, not towards her face. And then the last one is tricep extension. So elbows pull back towards her ribs. She's going to hug her ribs with her elbows and then straighten her arm out. So push down. Good. And then bend the elbow and push down. Good. So go ahead and drop those ropes. So everything she did with the straps, you can do with a band. Go ahead and hold the band for me in the center. So the first one with the band, I just pull straight back. So again, for you at home, you can anchor this either over a railing on the stairway or in the door, tying a knot in the center and closing the door, or tying it around a doorknob. So that's the straight back. Then the loops, my band has loops, but I'm just gonna slide my hands up to my elbows, and we're gonna hold here and pull out to the side. If your band doesn't have loops to put at your elbows, then I'm just gonna hold the ends and pull back with my arms straight. It's a little more challenging, but still doable. And this is one you would use a lighter band with anyway. The next one we did was turning your palms out and pulling down and out to the side. And then we did bicep curls, pulling up. And tricep extension, where we hug our ribs with the elbows and then pull down. All right, any questions on any of those? All right.
I think we're good, Sarah.
Stand up, Susan. Yes. We're going to do a single thigh stretch. Do you remember that one? Single thigh stretch. So the last one on the reformer is a stretch for the front of the hips. She's going to place her hands on the bar. One foot is on the carriage, and one foot is still on the ground. You see that okay? No, you can't feel it.
Yeah, that's better.
So now slide the back leg back, Susan. Is it too heavy?
Yeah.
So pull the green one off. All right. There we go. So the front knee is bent. Her back leg is pushing the carriage backwards. And she's feeling that stretch in the front of her thigh. On the reformer, we would do both sides. For home, I would just use a standing lunge stretch where I just step back, let the front knee bend, and so I'm standing like this. If you have a slippery floor, a kitchen floor, and wear your socks, you can slide that back foot even further in your socks and hang on to the counter. And then you get to pull up and then slide back into that stretch. So you get a nice stretch through here. Especially if you sit a lot throughout the day. Anybody who sits for their job needs to stretch out their hip flexor, which will help walking be a lot easier. Any questions?
There is one. How long do the bands last?
I'm sorry?
How long do the bands last?
Oh, how long do the bands last?
It's hard to say. We use the bands in the clinic all the time, and they probably last several months. But they used way more than you would use them at home.
Right.
As long as you don't leave them in the sun and the heat, they should probably last a few years.
Great. Thank you. That's the only question I have.
Okay. We're going to change positions again and move on to the myofascial release. So just give us a second to reposition.
Sara, can I go ahead and ask a question before you start?
Yeah.
There's that one is a comment, and it's I've had my bands for 2 years and I use them 2 to 3 times a week. Thank you, Carol. And a question, how many repetitions do you need of each?
So in Pilates, we use only sets of 10 for the typical person. Like I said, for Susan, we start off with only sets of 3 to 5, depending on the difficulty of the exercise. And each visit we increase because there's such a variety of exercises, but it all depends on your fitness level, your strength level, and what your stamina is like. So I would start, if you're at a low level, start with 3 to 5 reps. If you feel like you're pretty average, I would start with 10. If 10 is easy, then I would actually increase the resistance for you before I add more reps. If you wanted to add more reps, though, I would increase it to about 15 or even 20, especially for the lower limbs. Any other questions?
No other questions. Thank you.
All right, so are you comfortable, Susan? For the myofascial release, I usually just start on her legs just because it's easiest and we get to chit chat when we're doing it. She gets to relax and she's usually tired by this because we've already spent the last 40 minutes doing exercises. The pressure is pretty firm and I always push up towards the center of the body because of the vasculature and how it flows. I don't want to create any stasis anywhere in the lower limbs, especially. Oftentimes, if we're short on time, we'll even use percussion massage as opposed to just the straight myofascial release. And we use the hypervolt massage gun. So it looks like this. The heads come in different types. This one's a flat, firm head, which I would say is a medium pressure. They have like a squishy head that's a lot softer. So if you're more sensitive, you might use the squishy head. If you're less sensitive, then you can tolerate the flat one. Susan's feisty, she can tolerate the flat medium one. So my pressure is kind of firm. And like I said, I'm moving up towards the center of her body. And I'm trying to stretch the layers of tissue because of the stiffnesses in all the connective tissues. You have fascial layers that are like saran wrap around the muscles, and then you have your skin layers, and you don't want anything to feel like it's sticky. Any particular part that feels hardened, more hard, or more stiff when you're trying to move it is where you're going to spend a little more time. Sometimes I'll use my thumb. It makes her squirm a little bit, and sometimes I'll use the heel of my hand as I push up and slide up the leg this way. Once we kind of work all the way around the leg, so I work on the top, the inside of her thigh, the outside of her thigh, and then I'll even pick up her leg a little bit and work on the back of her thigh through here. It's easier to use my thumbs in this way and kind of work my way down as I stretch the tissue. So my pressure is in, against, and then I'm pulling down. So you're trying to push and stretch at the same time. And because her muscles are warm from the exercise, it should move relatively easy as opposed to if we would start off when she's cold. And then after I work all that tissue, and I make sure I get her calves as well. And again, my pressure is in towards her body and then up towards the center of her. Then I'm going to stretch each joint. I can hold her here and stretch out her ankles. And I want to make sure I go through all the available range she has. My pressure is slow and deliberate to the edge of where the resistance is. It should never really be painful when you're stretching. It should always just be a stretch. If it is painful, don't go as far. And for patients with the stiffened skin and connective tissue, I think it's more beneficial for someone else to stretch you so that you can relax. And because you might not have enough strength to overcome the stiffness in that connective tissue, but someone else doing it for you should. So I can then stretch the back of her knee. And she should feel this from behind her knee all the way down to her tailbone. If I push on her ankle a little bit more while I do this, it's also going to stretch the calf. It's also going to stretch the neural tissue. And then we bring our knee towards her chest. So everything I've done so far is in the sagittal plane. That means front to back. I want to make sure I do all planes of motion. So then I'm going to bring her knee out to the side. So it stretches more the inner thigh. And I'm going to bring it up towards her opposite shoulder. So she should feel that more in her glute. I can also, in this position, reach her glute a little bit better and work on the tissue directly. So we work wherever we feel the most stiffness for the day and try and cover any trouble spots. So anything that's painful, I definitely want to address that region and the surrounding tissue above and below and to the right and to the left. So now I'm going to bring her knee across her body. So this should get her glute and begin to get in her low back a little bit. Then we're also going to do rotation of the hip. So I'm going to turn her foot inward. And I'm going to turn her foot outward. I think the sequencing is important because you want to get the tissue as mobile as possible before you start stretching to maintain as much of the range of motion as possible. And then with Susan, she has had a hip replacement on the left side. So the range of motion that I use on the right leg is not the same that I'm going to use on the left leg. I'm still going to abide by the protocol limitations that she has for that left leg. Any questions so far on the lower extremities?
Well, it's a more general question about stretching, and it's, would a stretch lab be safe place to go for stretching, or do you recommend only working with a physical therapist?
No, I think a stretch lab would be okay, but you need to be vocal enough and you're in charge of your body. I think even with a physical therapist, stretching should never be painful. The only time it should be painful is if you have adhesive capsulitis or a frozen shoulder, and then the pain should only be in the joint that you're stretching in that moment. But in general, stretching for connective tissue disorder should never be painful. It should always be a stretch. And if it's painful and you don't say anything, you go to a stretching lab and don't say anything, then that's not a good place for you. If you are going to a physical therapist, I would expect physical therapists to take you up in the resistance and stop when they feel that so that you can get the link, and also maintain an open communication. In a stretch lab, they're going to go through a routine, which is fine. It's just make sure you're vocal enough to protect yourself.
Thank you, Sarah. And a comment from another one, Lorraine started stretching at a stretch zone twice a week for a few months, and she said it did help. And then there was another comment about the bands, and hold on, while I go back up a little bit. She just said that she's been participating in a virtual wellness clinic specifically for multiple sclerosis, as she's had the diagnosis longer, and they were given a set of various weights and bands. And there have been some patients' bands that needed replaced. It depends on how much you're using them. And then there are other factors such as being how much they're being stretched. And she said, I think that the lighter ones give out a little quicker. And she said her tip is make sure you always check your bands before you use them each time. And she says your eyes and face will thank you, with a little LOL. So thank you for that. I appreciate that.
That is true. I like the thicker bands, but they're, like I said before, you could get them anywhere, any sporting goods store, Amazon, Target. The quality of them is not always the same. So making sure you feel the band and the substance of it. You want to make sure that it's going to be solid and not just snap on you like a rubber band. I think most of the range of motion benefits Susan has had with us is in her shoulders, trying to put her hand behind her head just to wash her hair or brush her hair without bending over to get her hand here. We're almost there when she's coming routinely. Her right hand is much closer than her left, but even putting her in that position, and then my fingers are like little shovels digging into her armpit on the front of the shoulder blade to stretch out that muscle and that connective tissue. And the myofascial release part may be somewhat painful, but it should always be within your limits as far as tolerance of pain. And be vocal with your therapist or your trainer or your stretcher, whoever you see. Don't let them just torture you for torture. So how painful is this, Susan?
Actually, it's just a stretch.
Okay, good. Some patients, this area can be very tender.
Probably isn't that tender.
But you should always speak up. And you also want to be as relaxed as possible. If you're fighting the pressure, you're going to be more sore afterwards. And I always tell my patients, I don't want to work that hard, so don't fight me.
That one is sore. It's tender.
So if you were to rate it on a scale of 0 to 10, how tender would you say it is?
Maybe an 8.
All right. And when I stop, does it go away?
Yeah.
All right. So in the instance of any massage or myofascial relief, it might be tender in the moment that you're working it, but as soon as you relieve the pressure, that pain should be gone. If it's still there, then you might need to be done for the day in that area, or give it a break and come back to it. And then again, after I work on the shoulder a little bit, then I'm going to work on stretching her out a little bit more. And I go in all different planes of motion. And anytime I start to feel resistance, that's where I'm going to go back into the tissue and do a little more myofascial release to get it to lengthen a little bit more. So she can't get her arm out here, she's about here. So I'm working on her pec through here as I have a little bit of stretch on that tissue. Any more questions?
There was just a comment that the same person that went to the stretching zone said that the therapist is aware of her condition and exercises are specific to her. So that's good to know. And maybe you're helping people learn that they will need to be vocal to make sure that they have a therapist that will work with them in that fashion, and or a physical therapist if they go in for physical therapy.
And just as there's good and bad physical therapists everywhere, there's good and bad trainers everywhere. I worked with some great trainers and I worked with some not so great trainers. But if you're not your best advocate to communicate with them that what they're doing is too much or doesn't feel right, that's when you're going to be more likely injured. How's that feeling now? All right. Go ahead and let's have you sit up. I think that's all I had. We can sit.
Okay. That's us. We're done. Ta-da.
Hey, thank you very much. Let me go back on my camera. Thank you, Susan. Thank you, Dr. Sara. We appreciate both of you very much. Does anybody have any other questions related to anything that you learned today? Any comments you would like to make?
All right, so I have been doing myofascial release for years, and I use the lacrosse ball because I have to do my back and my glutes. And then I use rollers for my legs. And I can control the pressure myself. So,
Those are great tools to use.
okay.
Some people have a harder time getting on the floor to use a roller, or the lacrosse balls might be too intense for them. But those are great tools to use. And they even have a variety of foam rollers that have more ridges or bumps on them. That can be very helpful for some people as well. I would say you have to be a little less sensitive to use those as far as pain, but if it's more stiffness, then get in there and let those tools work for you.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, thank you for saying that. I think it's important. I just started a full foam roller with my chiropractor, and I felt so awkward when I first started using it, very awkward, and had a really hard time starting from the feet and working my way up. And I'm very inflamed. So it was a little painful, but what I'm noticing is the more I do it, the easier it becomes. And it's really great to break up that tissue. So I think trying to, and routine, right? You agree with having a routine about these things. And can I just say, you've got a couple comments. Thank you. This was great. Thank you so much. You are amazing, ladies. Thank you for all that you do for us. So I thought you would like to hear that. But can you talk a little bit more about that routine? I know that Susan mentioned when she went into the hospital, I guess the word would be sort of backslided, and she started again. And I think a lot of people get downhearted when they go through maybe really bad flares, maybe they're in bed, maybe, and then when they're starting to feel better, it's hard to push themselves in that place. So what's your recommendations on that?
Always start off slow. I call those instances in life speed bumps. Speed bumps are there to slow you down. It doesn't mean stop. It means you just gotta slow down and get over it and keep going forward. One thing I did want to add about the foam roller, a lot of old school thought is to foam roll your IT band. That's the side of your thigh. You don't need to do that. It's super painful and unnecessary. There's a muscle in the front of the hip right here, kind of in your front pocket. It's called your tensor fasciolata. It attaches to your IT band. That's a good place to put the lacrosse ball or a tennis ball if the lacrosse ball is too hard. And that in itself will help release the tension down the thigh. And also just doing the front of the thigh, your quadricep. Your quadricep is 4 muscles. And if you're trying to get a little more, the front side, on the front outside of the thigh, will help reduce some of that tension without giving you that excruciating pain. In regards to starting off, foam rolls come usually in a 6-inch round, but in our clinic, we use a half foam roll, so it's flat on one side, so it's a little more stable. For some people who feel awkward getting on and off of a rolling object. I also have people do it in their bed sometimes to start with, just so that it's a little more stable being sunken into the bed. It's not as intense when it's squishing into the bed, but that's an adequate way to get started. As you feel better and you need to get in there a little bit deeper, then move to the floor. And being able to get up and down from the floor for the duration of your lifetime is a good thing. If you stop doing it, then you can't do it anymore eventually. And as we get older, we lose balance, and trying to get up from the floor if you fall is a big challenge. And that's a whole nother level of difficulty that if you're practicing it on a regular basis, even if it's just once or twice a week at the minimum, can still be very beneficial.
Thank you. I appreciate you
once is
mentioning.
better than none, and 2 is better than 1. But
Starting
it doesn't
from-
mean you have to do 7 days a week.
So starting from the bed can definitely be a kinder way to start with the roller. And then once you start getting comfortable with that, see if you can transition to the floor, because you're definitely going to feel a little bit more, what would be the word?
Intensity.
There we go. Thank you. So that's a great idea. I wish I would have been told that when I started, because I had a really rough time. And what I did is I wouldn't go back to it as often under the circumstances. So that's a wonderful thought to maybe start on the bed. You got more just comments of people thanking you. Thank you for the demo. I've only ever looked into Pilates studio, though never entered. Thank you so much. Thank you so much for some helpful information, Sarah and Susan. Blessings. Very helpful info. Thank you. Thank you, ladies. This was very helpful, informative, and motivating. That's wonderful.
I would check out the Pilates places. Sometimes they have an introductory program just to get you to try it. I would encourage you to try it and see how much you like it. I'm not necessarily like telling everybody they have to do Pilates because we do it here, but I want people to do the exercise they enjoy. And I find Pilates has been very helpful for Susan. So most of her exercise is Pilates when she's here. But you're not going to know if you don't try it.
Yeah. And I actually enjoy Pilates when I do it. And it really does strengthen your muscles. It really does increase your range of motion, because they're putting the Pilates together with the stretching and the myofascial release. So you can see improvements in range of motion, definitely.
Another mention, the Pilates machines are great. I've tried them and I love it.
And for those of you with the difficulties in exercise tolerance, Pilates, reformer-based Pilates is a whole lot easier than mat Pilates. Mat Pilates requires a lot of trunk stability and strength to be able to lift yourself up off the floor. So that's where I'm a bigger advocate of the reformer Pilates, especially with conditions like Susan's.
That's good to know also. And again, I guess highlighting what you said, even with Pilates, when you're going into these places and you're starting these exercises, to be vocal and maybe not push yourself on the things that you can't do. And maybe you might have some tips on if they're showing you certain things and you can't, what would you do while you're standing there instead?
Well, for like in our clinic, we have instructors that will teach group classes. There's 6 people in a class. And if you're unable to do the new exercise they're describing, you might just continue on with the last exercise you finished. We also have privates or semi-privates where it's 2-on-1 with the instructor, and the instructor will customize the session to you, to your abilities, and find different ways to use that muscle, maybe putting you in a better position where you feel more stable, or because some of the exercises can be done in standing and still pushing on the carriage, like you saw with the last exercise. but a higher level of functioning on one is where her hands are on the bar with that last exercise we did where she's stretching the front of her thigh. A higher level would be actually standing with one foot on the bar and one foot on the carriage. So you're really challenging your balance and still getting that long lunge stride to stretch the hip. So if your instructor's trying to start you off on top of the carriage like that, that's not a good place for you. It's better to be on the floor. So making those adjustments with someone who's readily able to adapt the program to you is important.
Yes, well said. I was thinking when I started my physical therapy some time ago, and the gentleman was able to show me how I injured myself trying to go too far with the trainer. It was very helpful to learn some of the things that can stretch those out, kind of some of the things that you were doing with Susan. But I also appreciated that going to the physical therapist, he started that regimen for me. And then when I would come for my next appointment, he would check in on me. What have you been doing? How often are you doing this from home? So maybe for many of you, if your insurance does cover it, it would be really nice to start out going to your physical therapist and having them work on you first. It's going to get you a little bit more motivated, more comfortable, understanding what you need to do, and then going home and then knowing when your sessions are going to be over, that you're going to continue this from home on your own. And I also think it would be great that more people go and start getting more physical therapists used to working on people living with scleroderma. You would be actually helping them so they can do a better job as more people come on. So just a thought that I wanted to share with everybody. I don't think we have any more questions. Does anybody else have anything else before we end the meeting? Susan, Dr. Susan Nyanzi and Dr. Sara, thank you both so much for your time today. We greatly appreciate both of you and your efforts in helping us. Okay.
Okay.
My pleasure. Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you.
You too.
Bye, everybody.
Happy
Bye.
holidays.
Thank
Bye.
you.